One of the greatest and most influential philosophers probably of all time is a guy called Plato. He lived about 400 BC. It's a long time back, 400 BC. So we're looking at a span of getting on for nearly 2,500 years nearly. And you might think, what has someone who lived 2,500 years got to tell us? Well, you may well be surprised that many of his books have come down to us. And I've just picked out one here for you, which is Plato's Republic. This is a book published by Penguin. It's been in print probably ever since Plato was around. There may have been not many books around the Dark Ages, but it's been available, and it's still available now, and you can buy it from most shops. I bought this a long time ago at £3.50, probably £9.99 now. And you don't often get 2,500-year-old books that you can pick up and actually make some sense of. What's this one about? Plato. It's interesting. Plato has written about what would the perfect state be, the perfect organisation for the way in which you organise a government or a country. What kind of setup would it be? And I remember not so long ago, a student came to me at the end of a lecture, and he asked me a certain question. I said, did you know that the answer to that question actually is been answered many years ago, 2,000 years ago plus, by Plato in his book The Republic? And I recommended he went and got it. What really shocked me was the student came back within 20 minutes and actually had a copy of Plato's Republic in his hand, which showed how serious he was about trying to learn new things and to widen his own understanding of things. This is a book which has been read by famous people all down the ages. It's so well known that all the really historical people have probably read this book if they're interested in learning, because it's been around for so long. What Plato lays out here is his view of the perfect state and how it should be set up. And you might be quite astonished at the kind of totalitarian system which he lays out here. He claims that the perfect state is someone who is run by the wisest person. Discover who the wisest person is and make him the king, he said. You can't do better than that. And then arrange the state in its certain order. So there ought to be, he claims, an aristocracy, a leisure class, a thinking class, if you like, a philosophy class. And there ought to be a working class as well, who does all the background work to make sure the society keeps going. The thinking class does nothing but think, and the working group does all the work and the background work. You also need, he said, a third class. The third class will be the guardian class, because you'll need a class of policemen, if you like, in order to separate those who are doing nothing but thinking from those who are doing all the hard work in case there's some kind of violent reprisals. So he lays out his structure here quite well. You also find that he discusses four kinds of states in general principle. He says that the best state of all is his one, which he claims is the most well-run state, run by the wisest person, who he tends to think, not uncharacteristically, as the philosopher. So he has the philosopher king. Being a philosopher himself, he may well have been angling for that particular post, I don't know. But he reckoned that the king should be a philosopher, the philosopher king should be the one who, the wisest person, should rule the state. He said, but what happens is that if you have set up a state like that, degeneracy sets in to states, and they move through a session of 4 states. Once you've got the perfect state, it won't stay like that for very long, he said, because what will happen is you'll have, it'll degenerate from the sovereign monarchy of the philosopher king into an oligarchy, which means you'll have these kind of barons, these kind of families who get set up in order to, who get power to themselves, and they start to challenge the power of the king. Now that happened in this country in 1215, and when you had Runnymede and you had the powerful barons who sought to curtail the power of the king, King John at that time, and we had Magna Carta brought together. But he says that the purest and best state is the sovereign philosopher king. It degenerates on that to level 2, which is ruled by powerful families and oligarchy. Then he says from that you get a next generation of degeneration, where it goes down to a worst state, and that worst state is what he called democracy, ruled by the people, or wider rule. That he claimed was a degeneracy from oligarchy, and oligarchy a degeneracy from sovereignty. And he didn't have much to say about democracy, simply because it was kind of the rule of the mediocre, the average person's views, not the best necessarily, just the average, and therefore you got average solutions to problems. You didn't get the best solutions to problems. So he didn't have a lot to say about democracy, surprisingly enough. And after that, he said there's one final stage where the society degenerates yet again, and it degenerates into tyranny. So you go from sovereignty of monarchy to oligarchy to democracy to tyranny. How do you get tyranny? Well, when the democratic people choose their own leaders, and they can often choose the people who are the most persuasive. They can choose the people who are the most beguiling, the people who will promise them the most, people who are able to whip up a crowd and what might be called populism today, those kind of demagogues. He says watch out for that, because democracy can run into that. Those kind of things did happen, and they happened in the state of Germany, for example, during the 1930s, when Hitler was, of course, voted into power, Mussolini in Italy, Franco in Spain. Those are elements of what Plato had predicted 2,500 years ago. I don't think I'll read anything out from this particular book, but if you're interested in polity and how to set up a just society and the nature of what justice is in society, then this is the book for you. It says on the back cover he covers a range of topics from social, educational, psychological, moral and philosophical, and he lays down very clearly his criticism of democracy as not being the best system. In contradiction to Churchill, who said, well, democracy is of course a poor system, but unfortunately it's the best one that we have. Plato's Republic, 2,000-year-old book. Look it up if you're interested in politics and how to organise societies. Very famous book, very well worth a read.